This is part one of the toe-up sock tutorial, where we will learn how to cast on and to knit the toe part of the sock. This sock is knitted for size 40, for UK size 40. I'm using yarn from Opal. I think it's a German brand. I bought from a European yarn stockist. It's a quite nice soft yarn. It's the first time I'm using this yarn, and it's quite soft to touch, so quite nice to work with. The Sock Special sock yarn, the content of the yarn is 75% wool and 25% polyamide. It's a typical content for a sock yarn where we have a 25% synthetic fiber so that our sock is durable and wears well. For this yarn comes in skeins of 100 grams, which is perfect for to knit a pair of socks. So you buy one skein and you don't have to worry about buying another skein or running out of yarn. 75 grams to 100 is approximately as a guide for a pair of socks of average size. I'm going to put my sock onto the sock blocker so it's easy for me to point at the parts of the sock that we're going to be working on. The tools which I'll be using for knitting the sock. To start with, to knit the toe part, so to knit this part of the sock, I'll be using the Crazy Trio from Addi. 3 needles with bendy middle here. I find them quite good to knit the toe part. The size of these needles is 2.25. Then once I've knitted this part of the sock up to the rib here, I'll be switching to these double pointed needles, and these needles are size 2.5. You can use the magic loop method as an alternative to the Crazy Trio and the double pointed needles. If you would like to know how to cast on using the magic loop, I actually have a video on my channel which demonstrates how to do it. I will put a link to the video in the description to this one. We're going to cast on our stitches and then progress to making increases to knit this part of the sock. I'm going to zoom in a bit so you can see what we're doing, because the yarn is quite thin and it can be a bit tricky to see, and I'm just going to push the sock out of the way so that we have better visibility of what we're up to. So how much yarn do we need for the cast on? We need a smallish tail to leave in the end when we finish our casting on, because this tail will help us to tighten our knitting, because initially it will be a bit loose, and then which we will then hide when we finish the sock. So don't worry, we need this much tail to be left. And for 24 stitches, I'd recommend approximately 20 to 30 centimeters. Some people start the Judy's method with making a loop. I don't make a loop, I start casting on straight away. So we hold the yarn the way we do for a long tail cast on method. We hold the needles, take 2 needles. I'm going to take my 2 needles here, and I need a bit of a gap here. So using my top needle here, I'm going to insert into the yarn, twist it, so we have this like twisted loop, and then using the top part of the yarn, I wrap it around the bottom part, the bottom needle. So here are first 2 stitches. Now from now we're going to alternate our yarns, wrapping around the top part of the yarn is going to wrap the bottom needle, and the bottom part of the yarn that's wrapped around my thumb will wrap around the top needle. So the bottom yarn wraps around the top needle, and the bottom yarn wraps around, and the top yarn wraps around the bottom needle. And so we alternate wrapping our needles in turn until we have 24 stitches, which is 12 stitches on each needle. Now we have 24 stitches, 12 stitches on the bottom needle and 12 stitches on the top needle. Now we turn our knitting over so that the bottom needle is now at the top, And you will notice that the tail part, I've got a little bit longer tail than I originally expected, and that's perfectly fine. We will hide this tail in the end of our knitting, and it won't be visible at all. So this bit here is loose. It's not attached, it's not fixed in any way, and so we need to be careful that it doesn't get unraveled. So we just need to make sure that it's tightly held in place. So now I need my third needle. I'm going to pull this bottom needle out so that I transfer the stitches onto this rubber bit. So I'm going to just leave it there at the bottom. I don't need it for now. Here is my piece of yarn from the main wool, and that's what we'll be using to knit. And we're going to be making a first stitch. The first stitch, because it's unfixed, we're going to knit through the back loop. Very carefully. You can see that this yarn wants to slip out. We'll just need to tug it, pull it at the back, and that will be perfectly fine in the end. We just need to keep it all in control. The second stitch, we knit through the front loop. In the first half round, the stitches are positioned the right way, in the way that the front loop is facing us. I'm just going to knit to the end of this half round through the front loop. In total, I will need to knit 1.5 rounds to make sure that my stitches are fixed in place and they're all positioned the right way. Turn the knitting around. We're always going to pull out the bottom needle at each half round. So I'm just going to pull it out and transfer my stitches onto the rubber part of the needle, and then push the stitches onto the top needle. And now we knit the second half round. So let's have a look at the way our stitches are positioned. So the first stitch is a little bit misshapen. It's not very looking as well. So we're knitting through the back loop. And if you look at the second stitch, it's also facing us the wrong way round. To reposition the stitches, we need to knit them through the back loop in the second half round. So if we look at our stitches as we knit them through the back loop, we can see that they are repositioning to have the front loop facing us. And that's how we want our stitches to be on both needles. Knit through the back loop in the second half round to the end of the round. Our last stitch is going to be knitted through. If I knit it through the back loop, it's going to have this hole. So I'm not going to knit it that way. I'm actually going to knit it as a twisted stitch, and that's fine, as it will be part of the side ribbon. Just turn it around again, and I'm going to knit one more half round before I make the increases. One more half round. The last one's also going to be a crossed stitch. So the last one I'm going to knit through the back loop. Right, and here is what we should have for the first 1.5 rounds. Where the tail is now, this is where we began our knitting. I'm actually going to transfer the beginning of the round into here. So I'm going to place a marker in this part. I've got these markers which are actually find quite handy for this purpose, where I can attach them onto the knitting. Very lightweight, and they do not hang the knitting down. I want a different color marker so I can see it better. Blue is not the best color for this purpose. I'm going to place a green marker onto my sock. Here we are. So I'm just going to pin it. I'm just going to attach the marker. The round now begins from the green marker. At this point we have 24 stitches, so there's 12 stitches on each needle. We've knitted 1.5 rounds to position our stitches and to fix them in place, and now we are ready to make our first increases. Our increases will be in the following order. In the first 3 rounds, we will increase in every round. So in every round, we will increase 4 stitches. So there's 2 stitches on each needle. Then we will increase in every other round twice. So there's still 4 stitches in each increasing round. After that, we will increase in every third round 4 times, and then in every 4th round twice. In total, we should have 68 stitches after completing all these increases. First round of increases. So we knit 2, and we pick the stitch line below, knit through the front loop. This is the first increase. Then knit to the end of the half round, until we have 2 stitches left. Make a similar increase, but now we need an increase from the knitted through the back loop. So we pick up the stitch line below and then knit through the back, and knit the next 2 stitches, and then knit the other side of the increases. So again, exactly the same way, we repeat the same method. So knit 2. On this half of the knitting, we have this long tail. You've got to be careful you do not start knitting with it, so just push it to the back and make sure you pick up the yarn from your main skein of yarn, and then progress to making the increases. So we knit 2, pick up the stitch line below, knit through the front loop, then knit to the end of the round, and then knit to the last before we get to the last 2 stitches to make exactly the same increase as we did in the first half round. So here we pick up through the back, so just so it's easier to see, kind of I turn my knitting and pick through the back, the stitch that's positioned below, and then knit through the back, and then knit the last 2 stitches. And we've done the first round of increases. We've got 2 more rounds to make these increases before we progress to making increases in every other round. So just 2 more rows. So 2 more rounds. I will knit 1 more round with you, and then we'll knit 1 round on my own, and then we'll return to you when we're ready to make the increases in every other round. So again, we knit 2, as we knit each round, the knitting becomes tighter and tighter, so we just need to persevere. 2 more rounds to go, and it will get easier after that. So just again, pick up the stitch below, knit through the front loop, pick up the stitch with right needle and knit through the back, so the stitch line underneath the stitch here, knit through it, and then knit the last 2 stitches. So we've done first half round, then another half round to go. You need to make sure that, because if your tail is as long as mine, make sure you're not picking it up for knitting, because you'll have to undo it to pick up the main yarn. Right, again, so, and again we repeat the same process. Knit 2, pick the stitch line below. If it's getting a bit too tight to pick up the stitches, kind of, it can be a bit tricky because the space between them becomes tighter and tighter. Use your left needle to pick up the stitch underneath, like so. Now slightly pull out the front loop so that it's easier to knit through it, and then create a 3rd stitch. Again, I need to make an increase here, so I'm just turning my knitting over, pick up the stitch line below, and then knit through it. And the last 2 stitches. So here we are. I've got to knit 1 more round of increases before I progress to making increases in every other round. I'm just going to knit those increases on my own, and then return to you after I've made that round of increases. I've now knitted the last round of the first 3 rounds of increases, and hopefully you will have the same thing as I've got here. Your sock is starting to fold, your side ribbons are forming as well. Now we're going to knit a round without making increases. So now we're going to knit. My beginning of the round is where the green marker is, so it's always kind of the top needle where my round begins. So in this round we make no increases, so we just knit through. As you're knitting in between the needles, I advise you tighten the yarn so that you don't have gaps forming. So this round is nice and easy, no increases, and I like this. Just knit. We just knit in the round. Right, this round is done now, so now we're going to make 2 increases in every other round. From now on, our increases are going to be made this way. So we're going to knit 1, always tighten the yarn, and then we're going to now flip our increases so that we're knitting through the back loop now, but we're picking up the stitch which is underneath this one. So we're going to reverse the knitting, so kind of look at our stitches from the back, pick up the stitch through the back loop, and then knit through it. This is our first increase. I'm going to knit 2 before the last stitch in this half round and pick up the stitch that is underneath this one here and then knit it through the front loop now. And we repeat this process on the other half of the stitches. To show it again, so again we knit the first stitch. It's a tiny bit tricky for me because I'm looking through the camera and it's not the same as looking with my own eyes. So just knit through it like that, and then again knit the stitches until we get to the end of the round, to kind of the last stitch. And here we pick up this one here, knit through the front loop, and knit the final stitch. This is how we're going to be making increases from now on our toe. And this type of kind of change in the direction of the increases will create the even looking increases on both sides. Now I'm going to knit one more round before making the second lot of increases. That will give me in total in this stage of increases, that will give me 44 stitches. And before I move on to making increases in every third round, and then in every fourth round. So I'm just going to go ahead and knit one round without making any increases, and I will return to discuss the next steps. I'm going to go through the increases one more time. So I'm now on to the second lot of increases in every other round. So it's knit 1, pick up the stitch through which is underneath the second stitch through the back loop, and then knit this way. Then pick up the stitch again under the stitch before the final stitch, knit through the front loop, and knit the last stitch. To hide the tail from a custom, because it can be a bit in the way, it can be a bit annoying, you can just sit kind of when the sock's starting to form a little pouch, you can just push it in there so it stays out of the way. So one more time, knit 1, pick the stitch positioned underneath this one through the back loop, and then we knit to the end, and then we make one more increase, and that finalizes our increases in every second round. Done. Right. So, and you should have nice progression here of the side increases. You can see these are forming quite nicely now. So what we're doing next? After the initial 2 steps of increases, I have 44 stitches on my needles. Now we'll progress to making increases in every third round. This means I will knit 2 rounds without adding any stitches and then make 4 stitch increases in the third round. I will repeat this 4 times. At the end of the step, I will have 60 stitches on my needles. After that, I will make the final step of increases in every fourth round. So I will knit 3 rounds without adding any stitches and add 4 stitches in every fourth round. I will do this twice. After all these steps, I will have 68 stitches on my needles, and that will be the end of our increases for the toe. Remember, the method for the increases from now on is the same like we did with the increases in every other round. I will continue knitting until I have all my increases done and have 68 stitches. I will do this off camera and return once I'm ready to proceed to the next step. So now, just go back to my sock, to my knitted sock. So we've done this part here, so we've done this strip of increases. We now need to knit 3 more rounds without any increases before we progress to the 3x1 rib. So let's knit those 3 rounds before knitting a rib. I have completed all the steps for the toe, and I'm now ready to progress to the next part. So I'm now going to change to my larger size needles, my double pointed needles, and then knit in the rib, 3x1 rib, on the top part of the sock. My sole part of the sock will be knitted in the stockinette stitch. I will form the 3x1 rib with half stitches beginning from the green marker, as this is the beginning of my round. I only want my 3x1 rib on the top part of the sock. I will start knitting the rib with my DP ends. The sole part of the sock will be knitted in stockinette stitch. So to start my rib, I need to knit 3 and purl 1. So it's 3 knit stitches and 1 purl stitch. As I have an even number of stitches, I need to add 1 more stitch in my rib so that it begins and ends with 3 knit stitches. And just to quickly demonstrate on my already knitted sock, I've got my rib beginning with 3 knit stitches here before a purl stitch, and I have 3 stitches at the end of this rib after a purl stitch. I'm going to add that purl stitch by picking up yarn in between these 2 stitches here before knitting my last 3 stitches of the rib. So I'm just going to pick up the yarn and pull through the back loop. I'm going to knit the other half of the stitches in the stockinette stitch. I will continue knitting this pattern all the way until I've completed my heel up to here. I'm going to now knit the other half of the stitches in the stockinette stitch, and whilst also transferring the stitches onto the double pointed needles. And here is the second round now, so I'm going to continue knitting this pattern. Please note how I knit my purl stitches, which I feel allow me to knit them faster. So I pick them up through the back, so I kind of pull through the loop by picking up the yarn through the back of the purl stitch. I'd like to pause for a moment here and talk about how long we need to knit before we start to make increases here. So we make the increases for the heel before the short rows. So I turn my sock over, and on this side I've got my markers which mark the beginning of the increases. I'm going to take the ruler on the back of my yarn label and measure the length of the sock between the beginning of the rib, so the very first row of the rib, to the end of the marker. And the length here, it works out as 12 centimeters, just tiny bit over 12 centimeters. And now I'm also going to measure the length of the sock from the very beginning of the toe to the yellow marker. It works out as 18 centimeters. Distance in rows between the beginning of the rib and the yellow marker is 53 rows. You can knit 53 to 54 rows. Then we will need to knit the heel by knitting the increases, then form the heel with the short rows, and then form our decreases to remove the excess stitches, and these steps will be covered in my second video of this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.